Welcome to a last minute live stream on this beautiful Tuesday here in Denver, Colorado. I don't know how long this will go tonight, but I'm feeling a little bit ranty. I just worked with Logic earlier in the day in a few classes on campus, teaching on our big SSL, and it was there were some things I gotta say, and so I want to make sure that I not only voice some of those things, but also make sure if anyone else has any complaints or anything that we give you a chance to talk as well. So, in the comments, of course, if you're feeling a little bit angsty about anything in Logic, then let me know, because certainly this is a great forum to be able to moan together a little bit about this piece of software, which we often really like and find a lot of use in, and then every once in a while we get something that really throws us a little bit. First and foremost, I don't use a ton of third-party plugins, but I do have a few, and you can see the list here, like the waves. There's only one TC Electronic, but as we get up into here, there's some more of the Eventide, and there's a few more I still need to install. And then there's a bunch of instruments and things. Our campus, and we have probably more than most people do in terms of plugins on our campus computers. I was looking for a few different plugins today and just couldn't get to them. I mean, I kind of knew where they were, but I was in middle of teaching a class and trying to get to something, and we have like hundreds and hundreds of plugins, and it was just like, scroll and look, uh, and then of course somebody in the back says, if you were in Pro Tools you could just do plugin search, to which I was like, yeah, you're totally right. So for me, number one rant tonight would be the inability to really truly organize, sift through, search for, create favorites of all of our plugins that we have access to. Now, I'm having some little bit of audio things. Let me know if that's coming through too much. Feels like I'm popping a little bit, but we'll fix that, I think, moving forward. So let me know if that's something that you're all struggling with as well. But that's our number one rant for the night, is just getting the ability to search through some of our resources and find them a little bit easier. And so I think that that's a huge miss right now for Logic. They want us to be able to work with so many tools and do so much, and then when we actually get into a project, it can be really tricky to find. For instance, we do have like this recent area. And so that's great. It's like, ooh, I can get to the limiter I used earlier or one of these other things, but those get replaced, and then, we have to go back and find. And on top of that, the majority of what's easily accessible are just the Logic stock plugins, and we have to go down to a whole nother menu to get to all of the other ones. So I find that even though there may be some things you can kind of do, there are certainly some issues. And then we have the incompatible category, which I have a couple incompatible ones, but I forced them to work, which you can just say use and have them function. However, they go into this incompatible folder, and you can't move those around any way I've ever found. At least I've never been able to find a way to move them. So that, on top of all the other stuff, just keeps on compounding the issue that we're having. Okay, so that's rant number one. Number two was brought up by someone in the comments today, and that's with our mixer. And I love the mixer. It's, super great. I'm actually going to pull up the comment so I can see who was that said this. But the mixer is just really kind of tricky. So this was Nart Kelmendi, who's talking about the size of the faders in the fader window. So I'm going to just go to the mix window and say you wanted to make it full screen on a second monitor. This is what it looks like. Now I only have a couple tracks, but I mean, is there a way to make the actual faders fill the screen? I don't think they want us to work like that. What they really want us to do is work like this, and have like this somewhere else floating. But, some people actually want to have the mixer on a second monitor with all the information. And boy, would it be nice if those would actually fill the screen instead of just being this teeny little thing. I mean, I don't actually use the faders to do any sort of meaningful thing because they're pretty much useless. Meaning I don't write automation with them. I use a control surface if I need to do that, or I draw it in, or I use other effects and processing tools. In fact, I was looking at this. I've got the iPad app, which I do use for this sometimes, even though there's not a lot of tactile feedback, meaning I can move the faders, but you don't really get a sense like they're like an actual fader. It's like just obviously touching a piece of glass, right? But I was looking at them thinking, this touching the glass is so much better than what we have on using the mouse. I'm going to move my mic a little bit away. It's like takes up 3/4 of the screen on the iPad to what we have on the computer screen, which is like, like a third or maybe even a quarter of what we have on the iPad screen. And so I think that that's a frustration for me. And I think other people obviously people are talking about it. They had the comment in the other video. So rant number 2 is maybe a customization issue, or just, being aware of how people might use some of these tools, wanting to fill up a second monitor. I get it that it fits in this one window design right here where you put up the mixer by pushing the X key, and you can go and do a lot of stuff with this and customize what's visible. We can make it slightly wider or skinnier, but the minute we want to actually make like a second monitor, the place where we want to do mixing, it falls apart right away. And so that's number 2. Just the inability to customize and fill up an entire screen with our mixer, which every other workstation can do. I mean, every single one of them. FL Studio, Pro Tools, Ableton, Studio One, Reaper, all of them can do that. I just don't see a way to really easily do that here in Logic. Now, that being said, there are lots of ways to kind of function without that functionality, meaning having a control surface or using the Logic app. There's a variety of different ways to make that work. And so you just have to be willing to figure out the way that works for you. Ikatat says in the comments, I like Pro Q3's piano display. I'd like to see that in Logic. Would also like to see Logic teams take on racks like Ableton and Bitwig. Yes and no. I think that those are actually some of the cool things about Ableton and Bitwig. I don't necessarily think we need to take more from them after we got live loops. It's like, let's let them keep some of those features. But I see what you mean. There are some things that, in terms of plug-in functionality, that would be really cool to add into Logic that we just haven't seen any movement on. And so I think that's, I don't know if that would make it better or not. Over the years, I've had a number of complaints about Logic. Many of them have been fixed. Things like making the freeze track functionality actually useful, because in the past you could freeze your track, but it wouldn't actually take it wouldn't actually take the sound or the files out of the memory. It would just take the processing parts off, but leave the memory locked up. And so you could, freeze an orchestra track, but leave the orchestra in your RAM, and that doesn't really help us. It took them a long time to fix that. Adding clip gain, the gain tool was a huge thing. So they've made some changes, but I think it's time to continue to make them. Number 3 on my list tonight would be to stop introducing cool things like and then only do them halfway well. The drummer track would be a perfect example. The whole idea behind the drummer track is great. And over I hear people, this is like one of the number one comments on any videos I make from people, is that they want additional styles. Or to open it up so third-party people could do styles and have third-party people actually care enough to do additional styles. And so we're stuck in this limbo where they've introduced this amazing tool. They've done like this initial dump or two of files and styles, and then all of a sudden it like stagnates, and we don't get anything for years, anything meaningful at least. So there's so many. It's like they assume that there's only like 6 genres of music, and that's really unfortunate. Hopefully they're working on that. Hopefully somebody in the Logic team is like, you know what? There's a real opportunity here to increase what this tool can do. But of course, we wouldn't know that it's coming, and who knows if they're doing something about it. And at this point, we're just stuck with like the same ones. And Kyle, our drummer, the default drummer, pops up every time, and it's just a reminder of the sadness and the ruin of what that tool could be but isn't. Let's see. Murdoch Scott says, just found your video about external MIDI tracks not working. Checked your channel to see if you had a recent video on the subject and saw this live stream about lingering issues. That's so true. We've had a lot of progress on MIDI tracks in the last year or two, where we can now, like for the first time, assign like a specific port and channel to a MIDI track. And now I don't use external MIDI tracks all that much anymore. I just use the instrument tracks, which do seem to work. And you can use them like MIDI tracks, and you get a lot of beneficial things with it. But the external MIDI tracks are still just garbage. They've been garbage for a long time, but just have to use instrument tracks instead. And following up with that, I think something has to be really said about the MIDI effects. This would be the next thing on my list. And the MIDI effects are so cool. It's like I was doing some demonstrations today where I just wanted to like do a cool modulation with a filter on one of the synthesizers, and I threw up the modulator and, got it exactly what I wanted in a way that an LFO wouldn't have been able to do quite so elegantly. And then I thought, this is still something that I wish we could do with audio tracks. Not all of the MIDI effects work or would make sense with audio tracks, but some of them certainly would. And so those are the ones that I'm hoping they'll eventually make it so we could easily use them with audio tracks instead of having long, extensive workarounds. Or having them so they work with other parts of the channel strip, like panning and other things, which currently it's not easy to do as well. It's like, again, a great idea. Someone thought of it at some point and implemented it, and then all of a sudden they've abandoned making any progress on it or expanding that feature out. And I don't know if it's that someone who's in charge is like, no, my workflow's fine, or no one's really complaining about it loudly enough, and so they just assume that it's great, or that there's too much to do and they're working on a new version or something, and so they're not really stressing about it, or what. But years go by, and we're all living our lives and moving on, so it's not, who cares in the scheme of things, but geez, that seems like a real missed opportunity for some really cool functionality to be implemented. And so the MIDI effects only working in some places, it would be on that list for me for sure. Okay. I think we're on number 4. So number 4 is going to be, I don't know if it's controversial or not, but my iPad Pro, which is like a year old, it's not that old. It's an M1. It's one of the M1s, and I'm getting tired of the M1 processor in my iPad Pro being really good at just playing like video games, like stupid video games at that. It's like there's the Apple Arcade, and you have like, there's this new castle game where you throw bombs at castles to blow them up. It looks amazing. It's really cool. But why on earth did I need an M1 processor to play that game? Right? Why can't we actually have like a meaningful workstation on an iPad? And Cubasis is, I've been using that one. So I just got a new audio interface, which I'm having a little bit of trouble with tonight. I don't know if you're hearing the puffs of air sometimes when I'm overloading something. But I've got, let's see, I'm going to put it up on the screen. I've got a camera on it. It's this thing. It's up on the wall right now. I need to find its new home. But it's the SSL 12 with 4 of their preamps and 12 inputs total. I think really there's 16 if you count the talkback mic, which counts as a separate input, and then some loopback functionality. It's an amazing interface. It's great. I need to dial it in a little bit with this mic I'm using, but it's a really good interface, and I think that there's a lot of promise for that. But it just reminds me all the time of some of the weaknesses of the whole system. So what I was talking about was the iPad. I plugged this SSL 12 interface via USB-C cable that it came with to my iPad Pro, and that thing fired right up. The iPad Pro powers it, which I was shocked at. So it can power that thing, and then I just turned it on with Cubasis, and I just record armed, all the 4 main inputs, and then there's the 8 ADAT inputs, and they all worked. I could record simultaneously to them, all powered off the iPad directly in there, like it was just a normal old DAW workstation. And then I was like, in GarageBand, you have to like tell it that you can do multi-track recording. It's like you have to like say that in the preference. It starts as a default turned off. That kind of stuff I don't get at all. And so after you turn it on, it's like you have to like, it's like a struggle to get that functionality to work. GarageBand, when it comes to like actual stuff, is lacking. In creativity and simplicity and elegance, it's a great app. It always has been. They really got it right the first time, I think, when the power of the iPad was low. And then again, they've done like one update a year that's teeny, because they're like, why invest any time in this? I don't know. I'm guessing one of these days we're going to wake up in the morning and they're going to say, we've just updated all of our, productivity apps on the iPad, and GarageBand will all of a sudden be like some new beast. If they don't, then I don't understand anything about this company. I don't understand why they're just leaving some of the stuff as it is. unless there's some like mathematical accounting genius who says back in the back room, we've spent all the money we need to on this. Let's just live off the returns. Have like one or two people just updating this for every version. Like, why spend extra time on something if it's not going to really bring us more money in the long run? However, I think that there's a chance that they could actually bring in a bunch of additional funds if they really did something great with it, and maybe that's on the plate, but I just don't know. Jake says, I would love to be able to rearrange the track order in the mixer view. I mean, yeah, hello, that would be. It's like they're treating us like idiots. They're saying, oh, we need to keep this organized for you so you can find where things are. I don't need you to tell me where things are. I can find them. I can read. I can look and see where things are. I don't need them to be attached together all the time. That's totally asinine. What a moron move of not being able to let us move our mixing channels around independently of where they are up in the arrange window part of the main window. Murdoch says, yes, I purchased an M1 iPad Pro, assuming I would get deeper integration with Logic. Truth is, I've got an older iPad. It's like one of the iPad Air 1 or 2, maybe. It's like an old one. It's like no space on it. It still runs. It still runs the Logic Pro Control app. We don't need any power for that, and that app is great. I actually really like it. It could do more, but for what it does right now, it's great. The one thing, this could be, any of these things could be number 5 on my list of 5 things. The iPad remote app, it should have the graphic interfaces of all the plugins and instruments you use. They finally added the EQ, so you can do the EQ curve on it. I don't know why they don't just like have a little window that attaches better to each of those effects and plugins, and instead we just have slider after slider and page after page of sliders for each of those. That's useless. Jake says, I would also love it if you could solo specific frequencies in the EQ. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. Super easy. They can do it. You can do it in the multipressor in Logic. You can do it in tons of other EQs, just not in Logic's EQs. Murdoch says, even a light version of Logic would be fantastic. I just need something. Here's what I want, right? I want to be able to have my Mac Studio Ultra sitting where it sits and be able to sit down with my big 88 key weighted keyboard and do all of this stuff, my microphone, whatever. And then I want to be able to say button and send that to my iPad and go wherever else I need to go. It's like I'm in between meetings on campus, or in between classes, or just sitting in my office hours waiting for students or whatever. Pull that up, do a little bit of editing, blah, 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 close it, come back to my Mac Ultra and keep on working on it. It doesn't need to have all the same features, but they can do this in a way where there's enough overlap so that I could work on a number of things. Editing, flex pitch, all of those things. It's like those basics, or just adding effects and mixing. There's enough there. It's like I don't need the environment on my iPad. That would be totally insane. But a lot of the other stuff would be great. Ikatat says, another annoyance connecting an iPad to the Mac and audio MIDI setup. You only get stereo out channel from iOS, no audio in. Would like to route audio to iOS apps from Logic. So I've done a lot of videos on the IDAM protocol, which is what that is. And I agree. There's room. It's like, here's something we could think about. All that power of the iPad, right? Say we connect it with a cable, if we still have to do that. And there's a whole suite of plugins maybe similar to like the UAD stuff. We have the new guy at Apple from UAD. Um, Maybe the iPad could function as like an external processor for some really cool things. And so, it's like the stuff on there, audio goes back and forth between the two. You process it. It's adds power to somebody who has an older computer. Maybe someone has to get like the Mac Mini M1 with only 8 gigs of RAM or something, and all of a sudden, they have an iPad Pro. And I mean, sure, it's like the iPad Pro is more money than the Mac Mini at that point, by hundreds of dollars. But I mean, it's like there's possibilities here, and none of that would be new territory. In fact, there was a time when you had two Apple computers, two Macs, and you could run Logic on one and run the Node application on the second one on the same network or connected. Then the second computer could be running processing from the first one. That was a real thing up until Logic 10. And then they got rid of that. But they want us to get rid of the old computers and buy new ones. But what's wrong with making it so we could harness some of our older computers' power in a case like this where there's a professional need, and make it so that that's carrying some of the weight? It's getting use out of a machine instead of just throwing away parts of it. Let's just use it and get every last little bit of power out of it. I don't think there's a problem with that. I think that could be a really big strength in many ways. But, who am I to say? What else? What other things are you all wishing for? If any of you say, I want more flexibility like Reaper, then I'm just going to stop the stream right that moment, because Reaper has its own place, but we don't want to be like Reaper in every way. Reaper users, they're very passionate about their software. They would never have a video like this where it's the 5 things that are wrong with it. I'm pretty sure that they would all just be like, no, this is a perfect piece of software. It's there's nothing wrong with it. And to that I say, good for you. I mean, I'm happy for you guys. Super happy. So this SSL 12, if any of you are thinking about getting it, it's awesome. It sounds good. So far, it works great. Check this out. I'm going to switch over to the SSL 360 app. They have short little stubby faders in this thing, but most of it's for metering anyway. So who knows? I need to really go through this. I'm really excited to try out the loop back feature, which means I can play things from, like, for instance, YouTube. It goes out to the interface and then comes back in. So I think I'm still clipping every once in a while. Let me turn down the gain just a fraction. Maybe that'll make it so I don't clip so much. Got to dial it in. Always a risky, bold move to use an audio interface for the first time on a live stream. But that's how we roll around on this channel, for sure. Jamal says, bring back the link chain on the plugin. Plugin. What specifically are you talking about with that? You talking about this thing right here? So I don't know if that's what you're talking about or not. This is a really cool tool. So let's just boost that up for a second, and I'll add an EQ on the stereo out. I don't know if that's what you're talking about or not. Let me know. Bjorn says, I'd like to see a container insert effects for effects chains. That way you could basically make your own advanced effects. You could use track stacks plus channel strip settings today, but it's clunky. Uh, and I see some benefit to this in a way. Right now, if I really need that, most of the time I'm using Waves stuff, but Waves has the Studio Rack. It's actually a free plugin, at least it was when I got it from Waves. And then you can put all of their things in here plus VST3s. So like my sound, those are all just Waves. I think I have to be in non-Rosetta mode to use the VST3s. So I don't use it all that much. But the Studio Rack is cool for the Waves plugins. So you can do all that. Now, obviously not everyone uses just Waves plugins, but it's cool. Jamal says the link option that allowed you to switch between plugins on a channel strip. Let me do another. So if I'm doing these right here, the only thing I guess I don't remember that fully what you're referring to. The link chain that I use here is when if you have that turned on and you go to a different channel strip, any plugin that's in that slot will pop up. So let's do one more of those. And let's switch this out to like the limiter, for instance. So anytime I switch, it just goes to that next one. That's the current linking of effects plugins. So you're talking about something from back in Logic 9. It's getting fuzzier. I used Logic 9 for a long time. Well, Logic 8, 5, 6, 7. I can't remember which ones. I thought they skipped one at one point. I think now with 10, having been here for this long, a lot of those features are definitely getting fuzzier. Thank goodness. There was a lot of things in the pre-10 version which I did not like, and a lot of things in the post-10 version which I've loved quite a bit. Not to say it's perfect, but as we're talking about tonight. But I don't miss the old versions anymore. I used to have things I would be like, ooh, this is different. I don't like this. But I haven't felt that way in a few years now. So I think that's a positive sign. Cool. Well, we've been going for about 33 minutes straight of complaining. And I don't think I'm going to go too much longer. I need to dial in my mic pre on this mic because it was popping. I don't know if you could hear the popping or not. Let me know in the chat if it was just me or if it's something you could hear on the stream as well. But dialing in a new interface, it'll be a little challenge the next couple days. Thanks for joining on an evening stream. It's important to be able to rant. And what I'm looking at right here, so channels, this is Logic Pro, not GarageBand, but I think all in all, to summarize this whole conversation, I don't know how hungry Apple is in making this like the continuously best piece of software they can. They've done a lot. we get a lot for the value on this piece of software if you're okay buying a Mac computer. I almost always can tell kind of the heartbeat of what's happening by talking to my students, and I think, let's see, there we go. I think so much of what we do or how I frame a lot of this is based on my conversations with them. They're like on the front lines. You know, they're just out of high school. They're getting their first jobs. They're working for their education. And when I sit down in a room like I did this afternoon, I say, how many of you are even using a Mac versus a Windows computer? It's like 50-50. 50% of them aren't even on a Mac, and so they'll never use Logic. Ironically, they can use Pro Tools and Ableton and Studio One and FL Studio on either platform. It's just us using Logic that gets this. So I think they keep on telling us they're dedicated. They built a computer where part of the advertising was Logic Pro and Final Cut. I mean, the Mac Studios are supposed to be for creatives, and then it feels very much like they've just pushed us into wanting this computer, and then they're sitting there chuckling while, they're working on other stuff. They're trying to defend the App Store as a financial thing for them across the world. I'd be okay if the App Store monopoly went away on iOS. I'd be okay. I mean, I don't really have a stake in the game either way. But we've survived a long time on Mac OS without having a lockdown app store. We can buy stuff from other websites and other companies and download them and use them. My life wasn't worse because of that. I'm still careful about what I install. So I don't, maybe the general public needs shepherding like that, but I don't think that that's a hill to die on for sure. And Murdoch sums it up. They have billions. They need to spend some of that and hire some more people to fix and maintain Logic. From your lips to God's ears, And on that note, thanks everybody for listening to me rant. Getting this off my chest a little bit. Hopefully we'll get more people commenting over the next couple days on this stream. Bjorn says, agree, and Final Cut Pro is not making so much progress either. Both Logic and especially FCP need some TLC. Ironically, though, when they did the big update to the new Final Cut Pro, they just didn't have all the features in there. Now, that software can do tons of stuff. But you're right. Both things need some updating, and they need to stop thinking how they can just cram a new processor into one of these computers, and instead find a way to actually catch up with the software, and so that we can get the full power out of them in the first place. Thanks everybody for chatting. That's it. We'll probably do another stream in the next couple of days. I'm going to mess around with this SSL12 interface and maybe do a video on it. And I got a couple other things in the wings, but I will talk to you all later.